internet, it's Mo here with my September reading wrap-up. I was able to read 9 books this month, which I'm fairly proud of myself for. I also read 9 books last month, and that's more than I normally get to, so hopefully I can keep up the good reading streak and continue to do well this coming month. Anyway, let's get into the books. The first book that I read in September was A Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this is just a sweet, short, playful collection of children's poetry. I picked this up at a used bookstore last month, partially because I like poetry and I like children's books, and I've never read anything by Robert Louis Stevenson. And this is just so beautiful. Look at it. And it's got gilded edges as well. And then I discovered when I read it that it's got these prints throughout that are all the sort of Art Nouveau style, and they're just gorgeous. Overall, I just really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a lot of fun. The only issue I had with it was that there were a couple of poems in here that, due to the age of this, were sort of ethnocentric, almost to the point of being racist, but if you kind of skip over that, or those 2 poems, I think the rest of the selection is just wonderful. So if you haven't read any Robert Louis Stevenson, or if you like children's poetry, I would definitely pick this one up. Alright, the next book I read this month, I do not have a physical copy of, and that was Attachments by Rowell. And I don't normally read contemporary, but I was sick at the beginning of the month and I just wanted something that would be sort of quick and easy. And this is a contemporary romance novel. It's set in 1999, and I went through it really quickly, and it's got a sort of geeky slant to it, I suppose, and it's about a guy who gets a job doing internet security, screening people's emails for this company, so he has to read through different people's emails, and he ends up reading a lot of emails from this one woman and falls in love with her without ever having met her before, and it's just a really sweet story. I don't think I liked it as much as some people on BookTube seem to love it, but I think that's mostly just because I don't really like to read contemporary, and that if I did, I probably would have enjoyed it a lot more. But I did enjoy this book, and if that's the sort of thing that you like, I would definitely pick it up. The next book I read this month was The Diamond Age by Neal Stephenson. This is an adult science fiction novel set in a near-future Shanghai that is just overflowing with microscopic technologies. And it's about a young girl who gets a hold of a very advanced piece of interactive tech and how it affects her life and the world around her. And I think it was just really well written. The world building was great. There were some things I did like about it, some things I didn't like about it. So if you're interested, I actually did a separate review of this book, and I will link that video down below. The next book that I read this month was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss, and I actually listened to this one on audiobook, which I thought was a great way of doing it, actually, because the story is really the main character sitting down with some other characters and telling them his story orally, and so I felt like it adapted to audiobook very well because of that. Now, I know this book is really huge on BookTube right now, and lots of people are talking about it. I actually heard about it quite a number of times before I figured out what it was about, because everyone is talking about it, and everyone assumes that everyone knows what it's about. So I'm going to tell you, even though you may know, in case one of those people in that situation is watching this video. So I'm actually going to read a quote from the first chapter that really sort of encapsulates the story really well. And the main character says, "I have stolen princesses back from sleeping barrow kings. I burned down the town of Sheban. I have spent the night with Felurian and left with both my sanity and my life. I was expelled from the university at a younger age than most people are allowed in. I tread paths by moonlight that others fear to speak of during the day. I have talked to gods, loved women, and written songs that make the minstrels weep. You may have heard of me." And so this book is about a man who's become a bit of a legend in his own time, and there's all these stories that are told about him, but nobody knows which ones are true and which ones are not. and he sits down to tell a number of other characters the real story. And this is a trilogy. It's the first book in the Kingkiller Chronicles, and the second book is already out. The third book I don't think will be out for another couple of years, which is kind of sad. But I'm definitely looking forward to reading the rest of this series. I just thought it was really well done, very epic, very character-centered. You get to know the characters really well, and the prose is just gorgeous. So if you like fantasy and you have not read The Name of the Wind yet, go pick it up. Just right away. Oh, also, I was going to mention, while I was listening to that on audiobook, I went and bought myself one of those adult coloring books, and this is from The Secret Garden, so I colored while I listened to Kvothe tell his story. And I also listened to a number of other audiobooks, so I did this one as well, which took forever. But yeah, so I'm enjoying that and looking forward to doing more of them. The next books that I read this month were The Dragon Keeper and Dragon Haven by Robin Hobb. And many of you will have heard of these because they're kind of doing the rounds on BookTube right now. I actually read the Live Ship Traders trilogy like 8 or 9 years ago, and I really enjoyed it at the time, but I didn't realize that it was actually connected to any of Robin Hobb's other books. And I don't think that this particular series was out at the time either, so I kind of stopped reading Robin Hobb at that point, and then when I got on BookTube, I discovered that there's these new books and these other books that she had already written that were actually connected to the ones I already read, and I didn't know about it. So I'm planning on catching up on Robin Hobb, and I thought I would start out with these ones because I discovered they were like $2 a piece on my Kindle, so, you know, can't turn down a bargain. Anyway, I read the first 2 books of this 4-book series. I liked them so far. I don't think they're as good as the Live Ship Traders books, but we'll see how the 3rd and 4th book are. She tends to have good endings, so that may bring the level of this one up for me. She also does really good characters, and a couple of the characters that were in the Live Ship books come back in these, so that was exciting as well to get to see them again. The next book that I read, I actually listened to this one on audio as well, and that was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. Obviously, classic sci-fi novel, and I enjoy sci-fi, so I thought I should get around to this one. And this book is essentially what might happen if a marine biologist was kidnapped by a submarine captain and had way too much time on his hands. There were aspects of this book that I really enjoyed. I thought the action and the interaction between the characters were very good. I really enjoyed the plot. I did feel like the lists of Latin names of sea creatures were a little too frequent for my personal taste. The main character being someone who had studied biology, marine biology in the past, and then ends up under the ocean, and he does a lot of very scientific cataloging and talking about all these different things that he's seen. So that for me was not so terribly exciting, and I think if I had been reading this book in a physical copy instead of listening on audio, it probably would have taken me longer to get through it just because of that. But overall, I did enjoy the book. So the next book I also listened to on audio, I was on an audiobook binge this month, was The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, and this one is sort of the opposite in the sense of it was very short and didn't have a lot of extra science-y things in it for being a science fiction novel. Obviously it's a classic. I didn't realize how short it was. It was like 4 hours long on audiobook, which is like the shortest I've seen, I think. And I did enjoy it. It wasn't, I don't know, I wouldn't call it my favorite science fiction book, but I'm glad I picked it up, and obviously it didn't take that much time to get through. So yeah, if you don't know, it's about a time machine. A guy back in the Victorian era, I think, builds this time machine, and it's told from the point of view of this other character who is hearing about it from him, and the adventures that he went on when he went into the future. So yeah. The last book that I read this month was Flatland, A Romance of Many Dimensions by Edwin A. Abbott. This is also a classic novel. I don't want to call it a sci-fi novel, maybe like a mathematical fiction novel. It was a little strange. But the main character in this book is a square, and he lives in Flatland in the second dimension, and he shares with the reader about how Flatland works and some of its history and its politics, and then the story of how he had the chance to leave Flatland and explore other dimensions. So he talks about the first and second dimensions and coming into the third dimension and trying to convince the other Flatlanders of the existence of the third dimension. And it was written like 1880s-ish, so it's in this very formal sort of style that, because it was being told by a square, just made it really amusing, and I really enjoyed this book. It was like 100-some pages, so it was pretty short, and I just thought it was a lot of fun. I will say that there are some interesting political and sort of philosophical things in here. The people of Flatland are kind of sort of communist and chauvinistic, but as you see when the square leaves Flatland and discovers other things, his mind is sort of open, so I wouldn't necessarily say that the book itself is chauvinistic, but that there are characters in it who certainly are. But because of that distinction, it didn't really bother me. I just found it really funny. So if that sounds at all interesting to you, this book was just hilarious. Yeah, so that was the last book that I read in September. If you've read any of these books, let me know down below if you liked them or not, and let me know what your favorite book was that you read this month. And I will be seeing you guys later. Bye!